December 26, 2004, 7:58 in the morning. Banda Aceh, at the northern tip of the Indonesian island of Sumatra. Sunday begins quietly. Markets are opening, fishermen are returning to shore, families are preparing breakfast, and children are stepping into the streets. Then the ground begins to move. At first, windows tremble. Then walls sway, roads split open, and people fall as the shaking refuses to stop. The earthquake lasts unbearably long. When it finally weakens, thousands of residents rush out of their homes and stare at damaged buildings. Some search for relatives. Others try to pull the injured from beneath the rubble. It seems that the worst has already happened. But beyond the western edge of the city, the ocean is behaving strangely. The water is retreating. Boats settle onto the exposed seabed. Fish thrash helplessly in the wet sand. Curious residents walk closer to see something they have never witnessed before. They do not yet understand that the sea has not disappeared. It is gathering momentum, and only a few minutes remain before the first impact. Beneath the floor of the Indian Ocean, the boundary between two tectonic plates suddenly broke apart. A rupture more than 1,000 kilometers long raced northward along the Sunda Trench, while part of the seabed rose several meters within minutes. An immense volume of water was displaced along the entire fault line. What formed was not a single wave, but a series of waves that were almost invisible in the open ocean and devastating near shallow coastlines. The earthquake reached a magnitude of 9.1, making it one of the strongest ever recorded by modern instruments. The fault continued rupturing for several minutes, sending energy in multiple directions across the ocean. Seismic stations around the world detected the scale of the event. Specialists at the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center understood that the earthquake could generate a destructive tsunami. But at that time, the Indian Ocean had no unified warning system capable of quickly alerting every country, siren, hotel, and coastal village. On scientific monitors, the catastrophe had already begun. On the beaches, an ordinary morning was still continuing. Approximately 15 to 20 minutes after the earthquake, the horizon near Sumatra begins to darken. It does not resemble the clean wall of water shown in disaster films. A dirty, foaming surge moves toward the coast, filled with sand, trees, and debris. People hear it before they understand what it is. A deep, continuous roar, like dozens of trains approaching at once. Residents run through the streets of Banda Aceh, but the water moves faster. It crashes between buildings, lifts vehicles, smashes concrete walls, tears away roofs, and carries entire structures inland. Those who try to shelter on the ground floors suddenly find themselves inside a current, packed with glass, metal, and timber. Where the surge rises several stories high, the first rows of buildings vanish almost instantly. But the greatest horror lies elsewhere. After the first impact, the water does not become calm. It reverses direction and rushes back toward the ocean, dragging people, furniture, and vehicles with it. Then another wave arrives. Some survivors, believing that the danger has passed, return to search for relatives. They walk directly into the path of the second impact. While northern Sumatra is disappearing beneath the water, the tsunami's energy continues crossing the ocean at the speed of a passenger aircraft. Along the coast of Thailand, the sea also begins to retreat. Tourists walk onto the exposed seabed, photographing stranded fish and coral reefs. Children collect shells. The danger seems distant because no familiar giant wave is yet visible on the horizon. On Mai Khao Beach, a 10-year-old British schoolgirl named Tilly Smith notices the unusual foam and the strange movement of the water. Shortly before the holiday, she had learned about the warning signs of a tsunami during a geography lesson. She tells her parents that everyone must leave and refuses to stop, even when the adults hesitate. Her warning reaches hotel employees, and people are moved away from the beach and toward higher ground. There, the knowledge of one child becomes the difference between life and death. But along other stretches of coastline, no warning comes. Near Khao Lak, the water tears through hotels and bungalows, turning cars, palm trees and boats into battering rams. Many people run from the first wave without seeing that another is already rising behind it, higher, heavier, and more destructive. Several hours later, the tsunami reaches Sri Lanka and India. The ground barely shook there, so the population received no natural warning from the earthquake itself. Morning trains travel along the coast, buses fill with passengers, and fishing families work beside the water. The wave emerges from a clear horizon without rain, wind, or dark storm clouds. Near the village of Paralia, an overcrowded passenger train stops because water has covered the tracks. The first surge surrounds the carriages and residents from nearby houses climb aboard, believing that the heavy train offers better protection than wooden buildings. Then a more powerful wave arrives. The water lifts the carriages, overturns them, and twists the metal around the people trapped inside. The event becomes one of the deadliest railway disasters in history. Yet even this is only one scene inside a catastrophe, spreading across an entire ocean. Waves tear through towns, temples, schools, and hospitals. Telephone lines fail. Electricity disappears. Roads become channels of fast-moving water, while emergency services lose their own vehicles, buildings, and personnel. Still, the water does not stop. Many hours later, the tsunami reaches the Maldives, the Seychelles, and the eastern coast of Africa. In Somalia, people are killed by a disaster that began thousands of kilometers away, even though there was no nearby earthquake and no storm. The scale becomes almost impossible to comprehend. A single rupture beneath the ocean connects the fate of a fisherman in Aceh, a tourist in Thailand, a railway passenger in Sri Lanka, and a child on an African beach. The worst affected regions are cut off from the outside world. In Banda Aceh, entire districts, landmarks, and roads disappear. Pilots arriving with emergency supplies do not see a city below them, but a flat landscape of water, mud, and debris. Some villages cannot be located even with maps. Where homes stood the day before, only foundations and vessels carried inland by the sea remain. Clean water is scarce. Hospitals are overwhelmed or destroyed. Survivors write the names of missing relatives on walls and boards, moving from one shelter to another, studying lists and photographs. Many families never find anyone. Among the ruins, stories emerge that seem almost impossible. Fishermen turn their boats around and return to the same waters from which the tsunami has just withdrawn, searching for survivors. Neighbors tie ropes together and form human chains. Strangers share their last dry clothes, food, and places aboard trucks. Rescue workers operate without communications or reliable maps because the familiar streets no longer exist. In some locations, people are found clinging to trees and rooftops many hours after the impact. Survivors held onto wooden boards, doors, fuel containers, and fragments of destroyed houses. Anything that remained above the surface. Every rescue feels like a victory against the impossible. But beside every survivor is an empty space. Across Aceh province, entire families vanish in a single morning. In schools, there is no one left to occupy many of the desks. In villages, survivors are forced to bury their neighbors before they have time to mourn their own relatives. A catastrophe does not end when the water retreats. Afterward come thirst, disease, searches, identification, and silence in places where thousands of people had been living only the day before. For those who remain, the disaster is only beginning. The final count can never be completely precise. Around 230,000 people were killed or declared missing across more than 10 countries. Millions lost their homes, livelihoods, or access to drinking water. Along parts of Sumatra, the water reached heights of approximately 30 meters, while the waves crossed the entire Indian Ocean and were recorded far beyond it. Entire coastal communities disappeared faster than organized assistance could arrive. After the tragedy, countries established a regional warning system, installed new detection equipment, improved the exchange of seismic information, and began conducting evacuation drills. But the most important lesson cannot be contained inside a machine. When a powerful earthquake continues for a long time, when the sea suddenly retreats or produces an unfamiliar roar, no one should wait for an official warning. People must immediately move toward higher ground and must not return after the first wave. On December 26, 2004, the ocean revealed how thin the boundary can be between an ordinary morning and a city that no longer exists. Remembering those who died does not require fear of the sea. It requires knowledge. Knowledge that may one day give someone a few decisive minutes.